Please be seated. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome Prime Minister Bhutto to the White House. I'm especially pleased to host her today because of the tremendous hospitality that the Prime Minister and the Pakistani people showed to the First Lady and to Chelsea on their recent trip. I've heard a great deal about the visit, about the people they met, their warm welcome at the Prime Minister's home, about the dinner the Prime Minister gave in their honor. The food was marvelous, they said, but it was the thousands of tiny oil lamps that lit the paths outside the Red Fort in Lahore that really gave the evening its magical air. I regret that here at the White House I can only match that with the magic of the bright television lights. Today's meeting reaffirms the long-standing friendship between Pakistan and the United States. It goes back to Pakistan's independence. At the time, Pakistan was an experiment in blending the ideals of a young democracy with the traditions of Islam. In the words of Pakistan's first president, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Islam and its idealism have taught us democracy. It has taught us the equality of man, justice, and fair play to everybody. We are the inheritors of these glorious traditions and are fully alive to our responsibilities and obligations. Today, Pakistan is pursuing these goals of combining the practice of Islam with the realities of democratic ideals, moderation, and tolerance. At our meetings today, the Prime Minister and I focused on security issues that affect Pakistan, its neighbor India, and the entire South Asian region. The United States recognizes and respects Pakistan's security concerns. Our close relationships with Pakistan are matched with growing ties with India. Both countries are friends of the United States, and contrary to some views, I believe it is possible for the United States to maintain close relations with both countries. I told the Prime Minister that if asked, we will do what we can to help these two important nations work together to resolve the dispute in Kashmir and other issues that separate them. We will also continue to urge both Pakistan and India to cap, then reduce and finally eliminate their nuclear and missile capabilities. As Secretary Perry stressed during his visit to Pakistan earlier this year, we believe that such weapons are a source of instability rather than a means to greater security. I plan to work with Congress to find ways to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and to preserve the aims of the Pressler Amendment while building a stronger relationship with a secure, more prosperous Pakistan. Our two nations' defense consultative group will meet later this spring. In our talks, the Prime Minister and I also discussed issues of global concern, including peacekeeping and the fight against terrorism and narcotics trafficking. I want to thank Prime Minister Bhutto and the Pakistani officers and soldiers who have worked so closely with us in many peacekeeping operations around the globe, most recently in Haiti, where more than 800 Pakistanis are taking part in the United Nations operation. On the issue of terrorism, I thanked the Prime Minister for working with us to capture Ramzi Youssef, one of the key suspects in the bombing in the World Trade Center. We also reviewed our joint efforts to bring to justice the cowardly terrorist who murdered two fine Americans in Karachi last month. I thank the Prime Minister for Pakistan's effort in recent months to eradicate opium poppy cultivation, to destroy heroin laboratories, and just last week to extradite two major traffickers to the United States. We would like this trend to continue. Finally, the Prime Minister and I discussed the ambitious economic reform and privatization programs she has said will determine the well-being of the citizens of Pakistan and other Muslim nations. Last year, at my request, our Energy Secretary, Hazel O'Leary, led a mission to Pakistan which opened doors for many U.S. firms who want to do business there. Encouraged by economic growth that is generating real dividends for the Pakistani people, the United States and other foreign firms are beginning to commit significant investments, especially in the energy sector. I'm convinced that in the coming years, the economic ties between our peoples will go closer, creating opportunities, jobs, and profits for Pakistanis and Americans alike. Before our meetings today, I was reminded that the Prime Minister first visited the White House in 1989 during her first term. She left office in 1990, but then was returned as Prime Minister in free and fair elections in 1993. Her presence here today testifies to her strong ability and to Pakistan's resilient democracy. It's no wonder she was elected to lead a nation that aims to combine the best of the traditions of Islam with modern democratic ideals. America is proud to claim Pakistan among her closest friends. Madam Prime Minister.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by thanking the President for his kind words of support and encouragement. Since 1989, my last visit to Washington, both the world and Pak-US relations have undergone far-reaching changes. The post-Cold War era has brought into sharp focus the positive role that Pakistan, as a moderate, democratic, Islamic country of 130 million people, can play, and the fact that it is strategically located at the tri-junction of South Asia, Central Asia, and the Gulf, a region of both political volatility and economic opportunity. Globally, Pakistan is active in UN peacekeeping operations. We are in the forefront of the fight against international terrorism, narcotics, illegal immigration, and counterfeit currency. We remain committed to the control and elimination of weapons of mass destruction, as well as their delivery systems on a regional, equitable, and non-discriminatory basis. Since 1993, concerted efforts by Pakistan and the United States to broaden the base of bilateral relations have resulted in steady progress. In September 1994, in a symbolic gesture, the United States granted Pakistan about $10 million in NGO support for population planning. This was announced by the Vice President at the Cairo Summit on Population Planning. This was followed by the visit by the presidential mission led by Energy Secretary Hazel O'Leary, which resulted in agreements worth $4.6 billion being signed. And now, during my visit here, we are grateful to the administration and the cabinet secretaries for having helped us sign $6 billion more of agreements between Pakistan and the United States. During Defense Secretary's visit to Pakistan in January 1995, our countries decided to revive the Pakistan-United States Defense Consultative Group. And more recently, we had the First Lady and the First Daughter visit Pakistan, and we had an opportunity to discuss women's issues and children's issues with the First Lady. And we found the First Daughter very knowledgeable. We found Chelsea very knowledgeable on Islamic issues. So I'm delighted to learn from the President that Chelsea is studying Islamic history and has also actually read our holy book, the Quran Sharif. I'm delighted to have accepted President Clinton's invitation to Washington. This is the first visit by a Pakistani chief executive in 6 years. President Clinton and I covered a wide range of subjects, including Kashmir, Afghanistan, Central Asia, Gulf, Pakistan-Indian relations, nuclear proliferation, UN peacekeeping, terrorism, and narcotics. I briefed him about corporate America's interest in Pakistan, which has resulted in the signing of $12 billion worth of MOUs in the last 17 months since our government took office. I urged an early resolution of the core issue of Kashmir, which poses a grave threat to peace and security in our region. It has retarded progress on all issues, including nuclear and missile proliferation. A just and durable solution is the need of the hour based on the wishes of the Kashmiri people as envisaged in the Security Council resolutions. Pakistan remains committed to engage in a substantive dialogue with India to resolve this dispute, but not in a charade that can be used by our neighbor to mislead the international community. I am happy to note that the United States recognizes Kashmir as disputed territory and maintains that a durable solution can only be based on the will of the Kashmiri people. Pakistan asked for a reassessment of the Pressler Amendment, which places discriminatory sanctions on Pakistan. In our view, this amendment has been a disincentive for a regional solution to the proliferation issue. Pakistan has requested the President and the administration to resolve the problem of our equipment worth $1.4 billion, which is held up. I am encouraged by my discussions with the President this morning and the understanding that he has shown for Pakistan's position. I welcome the Clinton administration's decision to work with Congress to revise the Pressler Amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Terry?
Mr. President, you both mentioned the Pressler Amendment, but I'm not sure what you intend to do. Will you press Congress to allow Pakistan to receive the planes that it's paid for or to get its money back?
Let me tell you what I intend to do. First of all, I intend to ask Congress to show some flexibility in the Pressler Amendment so that we can have some economic and military cooperation. Secondly, I intend to consult with them about what we ought to do about the airplane sale. As you know, under the law as it now exists, we cannot release the equipment. It wasn't just airplanes, there was more than that. We cannot release the equipment. However, Pakistan made payment. The sellers of the equipment gave up title and received the money, and now it's in storage. I don't think what happened was fair to Pakistan in terms of the money. Now, under the law, we can't give up the equipment. The law is clear. So I intend to consult with the Congress on that and see what we can do. I think you know that our administration cares very deeply about nonproliferation. We have worked very hard on it. We have lobbied the entire world community for an indefinite extension of the NPT. We have worked very hard to reduce the nuclear arsenals of ourselves and Russia and the other countries of the former Soviet Union. We are working for a comprehensive test ban treaty. We are working to limit fissile material production. We are working across the whole range of issues on nonproliferation. But I believe that the way this thing was left in 1990 and the way I found it when I took office requires some modification. I'm going to work with the Congress to see what progress we can make.
Sahib.
Mr. President, what is your response to Pakistan's suggestion that the United States should play an active role in resolution of Kashmir issue?
The United States is willing to do that, but can, as a practical matter, only do that if both sides are willing to have us play a leading role. A mediator can only mediate if those who are being mediated want it. But we are more than willing to do what we can to try to be helpful here. And of course, the Indians now are talking about elections. If it will be interesting to see who is eligible to vote, what the conditions of the elections are, whether it really is a free referendum on the people's will there. And we have encouraged a resolution of this. When Prime Minister Rao was here, I talked about this extensively with him. We are willing to do our part, but we can only do that if both sides are willing to have us play a part. Helen?
Madam Prime Minister, why do you need nuclear weapons? And Mr. President, don't you weaken your case to denuclearize the world when you keep making exceptions?
We don't have nuclear weapons. I'd like to clarify that we have no nuclear weapons, and this is our decision to demonstrate our commitment to nuclear. No, we have enough knowledge and capability to make and assemble a nuclear weapon, but we have voluntarily chosen not to either assemble a nuclear weapon, to detonate a nuclear weapon, or to export technology. When a country doesn't have the knowledge and says it believes in non-proliferation, I take that with a pinch of salt. But when a country has that knowledge, and the United States and other countries of the world agree that Pakistan has that knowledge, and that country does not use that knowledge to actually put together or assemble a device, I think that that country should be recognized as a responsible international player which has demonstrated restraint and not taken any action to accelerate our common goals of non-proliferation.
On your question about making an exception, I don't favor making an exception in our policy for anyone, but I think it's important to point out that the impact of the Pressler Amendment is directed only against Pakistan. And instead, we believe that in the end, we're going to have to work for a nuclear-free subcontinent, a nuclear-free region, a region free of all proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And the import of the amendment basically was rooted in the fact that Pakistan would have to bring into its country, would have to import the means to engage in an arms race, whereas India could develop such matters within its own borders. The real question is, what is the best way to pursue nonproliferation? This administration has an aggressive, consistent, unbroken record of leading the world in the area of nonproliferation. We will not shirk from that, but we ought to do it in a way that is most likely to achieve the desired results. And at any rate, that is somewhat different from the question of the catch-22 that Pakistan has found itself in now for 5 years, where it paid for certain military equipment. We could not, under the law, give it after the previous administration made a determination that the Pressler Amendment covered the transaction, but the money was received, given to the sellers, and has long since been spent.
Well, would you get a commitment
So,
for signing the non-proliferation treaty?
well, what I will say again, what I am convinced we're going to have a regional solution there, and we are working for that. But we are not making exceptions. And let me also make another point or two. We are not dealing with a country that has manifested aggression toward the United States or in this area. We're dealing with a country that just extradited a terrorist or suspected terrorist in the World Trade Center bombing, a country that has taken dramatic moves in improving its efforts against terrorism, against narcotics, that has just deported 2 traffickers or extradited 2 traffickers to the United States, a country that has cooperated with us in peacekeeping in Somalia and Haiti and in other places. We are trying to find ways to fulfill our obligations, our legal obligations under the Pressler Amendment, and our obligation to ourselves and to the world to promote nonproliferation and improve our relationships across the whole broad range of areas where I think it is appropriate.
May I just add that as far as we in Pakistan are concerned, we have welcomed all proposals made by the United States in connection with a regional solution to nonproliferation, and we've given our own proposals for a South Asia free of nuclear weapons and for a zero missile regime. So we've been willing to play ball on a regional level. Unfortunately, it's India that has not played ball. And what we are asking for is a leveling of the playing fields so that we can attain our common goals of non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction.
Why has the United States toned down its criticism of India's human rights violation in Kashmir? Because of the commercial deal. Why has the United States toned down its criticism of Indian human rights violation in Kashmir?
I'm sorry, sir, I'm hard of hearing. Would you tell me why?
The United States has toned down India's criticism of India's human rights violations in Kashmir.
There's been no change in our policy there. We are still trying to play a constructive role to resolve this whole matter. And that is what we want. We stand for human rights. We'd like to see this matter resolved. We're willing to play a mediating role. We can only do it if both parties will agree. And we would like very much to see this resolved. Obviously, if the issue of Kashmir were resolved, a lot of these other issues we've been discussing here today would resolve themselves. At least I believe that to be the case. And so we want to do whatever the United States can do to help to resolve these matters because so much else depends on it, as we have already seen. Yes.
Mr. President, a domestic question on the bill you signed today for health insurance for the self-employed. Other provisions in that bill send the so-called wrong message on issues like affirmative action, the wrong message on wealthy taxpayers. Why then did you sign it as opposed to sending it back? Were you given any kind of a signal that this was the best you'd get out of conference?
Well, no. I signed the bill because, first of all, I do not agree with the exception that was made in the bill. I accept the fact that the funding mechanism that's in there is the one that's in there, and I think it's an acceptable funding mechanism. I don't agree with the exception that was made in the bill, and it's a good argument for a line item veto that applies to special tax preferences as well as to special spending bills. If we had the line item veto, it would have been a different story. But I wanted this provision passed last year, and the Congress didn't do it. I think it's a down payment on how we ought to treat the self-employed in our country. Why should corporations get 100% deductibility and self-employed people get nothing, or even 25% or 30%? I did it because tax day is April the 17th, and these people are getting their records ready, and there are millions of them, and they're entitled to this deduction. It was wrong for it ever to expire in the first place. Now, I also think it was a terrible mistake for Congress to take the provision out of the bill, which allows, which would have required billionaires to pay taxes on income earned as American citizens and not to give up their citizenship just to avoid our income tax. But that can be put on any bill in the future. It's hardly a justification to veto a bill that something unrelated to the main subject was not in the bill. It is paid for. This definitely ought to be done. It was a bad mistake by Congress, but it is not a justification to deprive over 3 million American business people and farmers and all of their families the benefit of this more affordable health care through this tax break.
Right.
Mr. President, don't you think that the United States is giving wrong signals to its allies by dumping Pakistan, who has been an ally for half a century, in the cold after the Afghan war?
First of all, sir, I have no intention of dumping Pakistan. Since I've been president, we have done everything we could to broaden our ties with Pakistan, to deepen our commercial relationships, our political relationships, and our cooperation. The present problem we have with the fact that the Pressler Amendment was invoked for the first, passed in 1985, invoked for the first time in 1990, and put Pakistan in a no man's land where you didn't have the equipment and you'd given up the money, that is what I found when I became president. And I would very much like to find a resolution of it. Under the amendment, I cannot, I will say again, under the law, I cannot simply release the equipment. That is, I cannot do that lawfully. Therefore, we are exploring what else we can do to try to resolve this in a way that is fair to Pakistan. I have already made it clear to you, and I don't think any American president has ever said this before, I don't think it's right for us to keep the money and the equipment. That is not right. And I'm going to try to find a resolution to it. I don't like this. Your country has been a good partner, and more importantly, has stood for democracy and opportunity and moderation, and is the future of the entire part of the world where Pakistan is depends in some large measure on Pakistan's success. So we want to make progress on this. But the United States, A, has a law, and B, has large international responsibilities in the area of nonproliferation, which we must fulfill. So I'm going to do the very best I can to work this out. But I will not abandon Pakistan. I'm trying to bring the United States closer to Pakistan, and that's why I am elated that the Prime Minister is here today.
And I'd like to say that we're deeply encouraged by the understanding that President Clinton has shown of Pakistan's situation vis-a-vis the equipment and vis-a-vis the security needs arising out of the Kashmir dispute, and also that Pakistan is willing to play ball in terms of any regional situation. We welcomed American mediation to help resolve the Kashmir dispute. We are very pleased to note that the United States is willing to do so if India responds positively. And when my president goes to New Delhi next month, this is an issue which he can take up with the Prime Minister of India, that let's get down to the business of settling the core dispute of Kashmir so that our two countries can work together with the rest of the world for the common purpose of peace and stability.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you.